You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel. As you can see, fortunately, Darryl's not with me yet. I don't know why. He hasn't really let me know. So, I'm hoping that at some point he jumps on. Of course, I'll keep you guys posted, but you know what? Can't let this go, right? Look, we're talking Star Wars tonight, and we're talking Ahsoka, and we're talking Ahsoka Episode 6. So I have to say, of course, Dragonfly Mask is with us tonight. What's going on? You know what? I'm even going to put this up. I'm going to put this up, Dragonfly, because you're always with us, man. Woo! Yeah, that's right. All right, so it's good that you're with me tonight. It's good that everybody is with me tonight. I'm actually looking forward to talking about this episode. Hopefully, Darryl can join us pretty soon. I'm really hoping that maybe he's just having a technical issue or something and he's just trying to solve it. But again, now that we're streaming at 11 o'clock, it's like I didn't really want to make you guys wait forever. So, it's going to be one of those things where, again, I wasn't really prepared. I'll be honest. I was not prepared to do this solo. I wasn't prepared to do this on my own because, as you know, this is a show where there's a reason why there's a co-host. Well, you know what? I got Dragonfly with me. I'm sure I'm going to have more people chatting pretty soon. We're going to get through this. There is a lot to talk about tonight with Ahsoka Episode 6. I have to say, my initial thoughts are this actually felt a lot more like Star Wars. It was a thing that I don't really want to say that the other ones didn't, because they did actually capture the fun. They captured everything about Star Wars that most people like. But again, there were some problems with the first few episodes. Let's face it. There was wooden acting. There was a lot of things. Of course, David, one of our regular viewers, pointed out. There was just some plot issues, some character issues. Definitely one of the things that I could say is that Dave Filoni is inexperienced with live action. I think that that's actually plagued the series quite a bit. So, it's just there was a lot of issues, I think, with the first few episodes of Ahsoka. And then, I want to say like around episode 4, it started to improve a little bit. And then, of course, the last episode was a huge improvement over everything. So, obviously, you were dealing with a shift. I want to say it was a shift in the writing. It was a shift in the acting. It explained a little bit why Ahsoka seemed so emotionless, right? Because we had the whole World Between Worlds thing, and we had the scene with Anakin, and it was actually pretty cool. We really enjoyed that. So there was a lot to like in the last episode. So, of course, the big question was, would that continue for this episode? And I would have to say a resounding yes. It did. Of course, this is the episode, that we got the introduction of Thrawn. The introduction of Thrawn did not disappoint. It was a pretty breathtaking thing, actually, in my opinion. There were just like a lot of things that we can digest. And unlike last time, I actually wrote down a lot of notes, which I usually try to do with these things. Which, if I actually have to carry this show by myself, then I'm glad that I have these notes. Because, again, this is a show that usually has a co-host, and we go back and forth and everything else. So, again, I apologize that Darryl's not here. I have no idea why he's not here. He didn't really tell me that he wasn't going to be. So, just in full disclosure, I was not prepared to do this on my own. So this episode's a little bumpy, just hang on. And if you're out there live watching this right now as we're going on, hey, feel free to chat in. You guys could be my co-host tonight. So let's just go ahead and get started. Like I said, the initial thoughts of this were that it felt a lot more like Star Wars. It should not have taken 6 episodes to get to this point. That's going to be my first criticism. If I have a criticism at all, that's the one that I would have. Now, Dragonfly Mask, who's basically going to play co-host for me today, is chatting in. He's saying episode 6 was a good slowdown for the last episode, and it's cool how little they had to do to show how strong Thrawn's presence is. Yeah, and you know what? We can actually start to deal with Thrawn's presence, honestly, because let's face it, Grand Admiral Thrawn is what we have been waiting for the entire episode. Okay? I mean, I don't think it's any secret that, and we even said this for episode 5. We said that they really needed to introduce Thrawn in this episode, that it was going to be a necessary thing to introduce him for this episode. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, there's only so much that you can keep building a character before it becomes tiresome if you don't introduce that character. So the threat of Thrawn, of course, has permeated this entire show. We, of course, heard about him since season 2 of The Mandalorian, when Ahsoka basically was fighting Morgan Elsbeth and was like, "Where's Thrawn?" And we didn't know too much about it. And actually, when we were talking about that episode, because, we did review all the seasons of The Mandalorian. If you guys missed any of them, you can go back and check it out. But we did talk about it then. We said, look, we think that this is basically acting as somewhat of a pilot for an Ahsoka series. And that's absolutely what it was. Because not only, obviously, was it Ahsoka and she's looking for Ezra Bridger and looking for Thrawn, but Morgan Elsbeth ended up being one of the main villains of this show. So it absolutely was a pilot for the Ahsoka series. And so consequently, I think that when you set something up that early, because remember, that was Mandalorian season 2, which was a few years ago. Actually, more than a few years ago. And now you get the Ahsoka series, and you're mentioning Thrawn, and you're having this whole issue with Thrawn and everything. And so I think it ends up becoming an issue where it's like, look, you have got to introduce this character at some point. I don't necessarily have a problem with the fact that it took 6 episodes to do that, because you do need a proper setup. But I think my biggest issue is that, I don't think that it should have taken this long for the Ahsoka series to finally find its footing. Now, you guys might have a completely different opinion about this. I know some of you guys are on board with the Ahsoka series right from the beginning. Like, you didn't really see too many problems. Now, I will say that people who watch our particular show had more of a tendency to agree with us. That, yes, it's an enjoyable show. Yes, it's fun to watch. But, it does have some problems. It has some issues. It has some things that are, let's just say, hindering the quality of the show. And then, of course, there's also some things that really don't make sense from an in-universe plot standpoint either. So, again, like I said, we're going to start to dissect this a little bit. I'm going to start to go through all the notes that I took. Of course, I want to hear from you guys, especially since Darryl isn't here right now. I really want to hear from you guys because, again, this was not meant to be a solo show tonight. So, in the chats, feel free, go ahead and let's talk about this. But I'll get the ball rolling. I'll get the ball rolling with this. Let me see what I got for my notes here, because my initial thoughts, of course, were that it was more like Star Wars. It was a lot less confining, right? You didn't really necessarily feel the volume. One of the criticisms that I had about Obi-Wan was the fact that you really felt like this thing was claustrophobic. There was a lot of it was really obvious that they were shooting in the volume. All right, cool. Ronaldo's joining us. Dragonfly's got something else. Cool. You guys, you're saving me here. Dragonfly says, I agree to that. The first 3 episodes went up and down a bit. Yeah, they were. They were a little bit uneven. I think that a lot of that was intentional, though. So again, I'm willing to give a little bit of a free pass on the fact that it seemed uneven. I don't know, but at the same time, I do think a lot of that is just poor writing, a little bit poor direction. Maybe the character development was messy, and now we have Darryl with us. Thank the maker. It's like I said, man, I didn't get any information from you. I just assumed that you were going to be on, but I had to start carrying the show. So,
nah, I appreciate it. Sorry about that. It's that whole Michigan law where you can't text and drive, so I was kind of tied up and then ran into all this crazy traffic. But anyway.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good that you're here. I mean, basically, I was just setting it up. And look, the only thing that I basically said so far that's of any value, that wasn't me dancing, waiting for you to get on, was pretty much how, it shouldn't have taken this long for them to really find their footing. That, episode 6 felt a lot more like Star Wars. And, of course, Thrawn's entrance was amazing and stuff like that. And we're just starting to get into a lot of this stuff. Let me just get some of these chats in. And then I'll get your overall thoughts on this, and then we'll be caught back up. Ronaldo says, hey, Eric, I really loved this episode. Was it perfect? No. Still had a lot of amazing things. Thrawn was awesome. Yes, absolutely. Of course, Dragonfly Mass says, welcome, Darryl. Nobody's saying welcome, Darryl, more than me right now. Ronaldo says, to me, Ezra, that's another good point, too. I didn't really mention that in my whole opening monologue, but Ezra made his appearance in this thing, too. He says, to me, Ezra felt the same way he did in Rebels. I would agree with that. Ronaldo, of course, says, hey, Darryl, what's up? Ronaldo says that Enoch guy looks cool. Yes, we're going to talk about him. Dwight says, well, hello there. Very nice. Dragonfly Mask, he's talking to Ronaldo, but he says he hasn't lost the optimism. I love that, too. And then Dwight says that Ezra was perfect casting to me. Okay, so we got a little bit of a, kind of a, like an overview, I guess, of what our audience is saying right now, at least our live audience. So overall, what was your impression?
Overall, I thought it was an all right episode. I liked some things, but it was in some ways kind of anticlimactic in a way.
Really? Okay. What were they?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I took a bunch of notes, so had it taken you longer to actually get on tonight, one of the things that was kind of funny, you remember how the last episode I talked about how, like, I didn't have time, usually I do the notes on the second viewing kind of thing.
Yeah.
And for the last episode or two, I just hadn't had the time. This time, what I decided to do was actually take the notes on my first viewing. Okay. So I got a bunch of notes that I'll go through, but I am curious on what you thought. Again, I agree. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a perfect episode. There were some things, but I think overall, a lot of the little weaknesses or whatever didn't really bother me that much. But by all means, go ahead.
Well, like the whole thing with Balin, I did like that, his kind of exposition on some things as far as the Jedi Order and things of that nature, as he was talking to Shin.
Yeah, that actually was pretty cool. That was something.
Yeah.
And I always like it. It's no different than in Obi-Wan when you had Obi-Wan talking to Leia, and it's also like expositional dialogue that basically moves the story forward. And I thought that that's a lot what the Balin Shin stuff did, because it was pretty much telling you what Balin's motives were in this and what he was looking for and what he's doing, because right from the very beginning, he's one of the major players in this, but you really don't know why. You know why Morgan's there. You know why ultimately Thrawn, even though this is the first time we see him, You know why he's there. You know why a lot of these other guys are doing what they're doing. But you really didn't know what Balin was doing. He would allude
Yeah.
to it. But you're right. This is when he now gives a bunch of exposition on what his whole trip is for this whole thing.
Yeah. And then, we see the Dathomir witches, of course. And,
Yes.
it's like, okay, that was cool. That was a nice nod to the Clone Wars and even Rebels.
Well, more so the expanded universe. It's funny because the Dathomir witches actually were an invention of the courtship of Princess Leia. That's really where they made their first appearance. And then what Filoni did was he lifted them and put them in the Rebels series and a little bit in the Clone Wars too, because, oh man, I always forget that dude's name. The Darth Maul's brother guy.
Savage Opress.
Yes, Savage Opress. I don't know why I can never remember that, but they basically created him. They're kind of like the main Night Sister is like Maul's mother. I mean, they did actually expand that quite a bit, but it was cool to see them in this, and it was really cool to see them looking exactly the way that we saw them in Rebels. So, absolutely.
Yeah. But then, I like Thrawn's appearance. Like when Thrawn finally does show up, I did like the Star Destroyer, like the old Imperial Star Destroyer. Like
that's actually
that
the
brought a lot of
Chimera.
this
The Chimera was, or the Chimera, however you want to say it. But that's something that's anybody that's been following Thrawn since the days of Heir to the Empire and all that stuff. That's goosebump-inducing stuff right there. And the way that they did it, absolutely, it was just incredible. And then the whole, when they're chanting his name and he's coming. One of the things I really liked about this was you really felt like Thrawn's a real threat. He's like the real deal. They really set that up because you and I had talked about the whole live action thing for a long time, and it was really important. Like, okay, they're going to put Thrawn in live action. And, I mean, for my money, they couldn't have come up with a better introduction for this guy. It was very reminiscent to me of when we first see the Emperor in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I love the look of the troopers, like the stormtroopers, like the like the battle scars that they have on the uniform. I love that aspect of it. It looks dirty and grungy, like they've been in a war and they've been kind of like, really surviving out there. Like I love
exactly exiled, right?
Yeah, so I love that. And then, like I thought it was hilarious. I did think it was funny when Sabine tried to use the Force to open the door, and she couldn't do it. She thought she was doing it, but it was really Thrawn pulling up.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was a really funny misdirection as well.
Yeah, so I thought that was cool, but like, I felt like Thrawn though, like I wanted more music. I think that's what, like, the music that came with Thrawn didn't sell me. I'm not expecting like an Imperial march.
Well, that's kind of funny because
something.
But they actually used the music that they used for him in Rebels, the Thrawn's theme that they invented. They used that theme.
I didn't catch it. It did seem maybe it was me. Maybe I watched it too.
No, it was subtle. I mean, it was not.
Yeah, I want more like gravitas, like when he's pulling, like he's the big bad guy. Like, you want.
Well,
more...
I think a lot of that was the chanting and the almost like tribal nature of everything. I thought that was cool. I mean, could they have pumped his theme up in the mix a little bit more? Probably. But I don't know. It's like, and this is where it becomes a little bit subjective. You can. I think that what they actually chose to do was great. They're chanting his name. He's walking in. I mean, just look at the scene that's to the. No, this one.
Yeah, that one.
Like right there. Basically, I thought that they actually exceeded my expectations on how they would do it. So I guess his theme was present, and they did do that. And I thought that was cool that they actually brought that back from Rebels. Because obviously that's where they created the theme. So I thought that was nice, but I mean, I agree that they probably could have brought that a little bit up and maybe made it a little bit more obvious, but I don't know. I was completely enthralled with the way he was introduced, and he's walking through this, like, all these stormtroopers. Like I said, it was very much reminiscent of when Palpatine landed, and you know.
Well, I like how they didn't show his face initially. Like you see his feet, and then you kind of see the back of him, and then it kind of like you finally reveal. And it's just amazing to me how much he looks like Brent Spiner. It's just
I know. I was
ridiculous to me.
thinking the same thing too. And I mean,
It
the
kind of
nice
took me out of it a little bit at first.
but I will say this: I more so than in Rebels, I will actually go as far. One of the things that I really like, I don't know if it's in my note. I haven't even consulted my notes yet, but one of the things that hit me right away is the fact that he's more like Thrawn in the books. The way that he's being depicted in live action. Because if you remember, like, even in some of Timothy Zahn's later books, he's got a Thrawn trilogy, and then there's a Thrawn Ascendancy, and then, you know, you have his appearance in Rebels. He's actually a lot closer to the expanded universe version of Thrawn than the way he was depicted in Rebels. And I was really on board with this. I had to put this up here right now. I mean, there's a ton of chats we have to get to, but this one from Ronaldo is priceless because I have to confess I thought the same thing. He says, Thrawn looked like Elon Musk.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
you know, I mean, what can I tell you? I mean...
the whole Sabine thing, like, okay, so you're just going to give me my weapons and that's it? You know, it's just like, I don't know. It's just something about her portrayal of Sabine is kind of off to me. I can't quite put my finger on what it is exactly, but
no, you're right. It is off,
and it's almost kind of like she has like a little Poe Dameron in there a little bit.
A little bit, yes, a little bit. Well, here's a couple of things, and these are some complaints from some of my coworkers and things like. Because of course we've been discussing this. One was, you know, somebody brought up that they're all the way across the galaxy, and yet it kind of looks like a normal planet. It's like, it looks a little too common, you know? The other thing is, one of the things that I had a problem with, I mean, if we're going to just kind of go into some of the problems, you know, Sabine didn't really seem nervous enough to me. I mean, if you're being exiled and you're being kicked out into the strange planet across the galaxy, and she's over there, like, shooing away her little whatever that beast is, and you know, like, oh, you ran at the first sign, you know, go away or whatever. I'm thinking,
yeah, that was
really
so corny to me.
Really?
That was so
well,
corny.
Not only was it corny, but it didn't make any sense. It's like,
oh yeah,
that thing is like you're only
mode of transportation,
right?
That's gonna move you quickly,
It's
or
like
your food source,
right? I mean, you better be like the nicest person in the world to that thing. It's like you're in a, and again, this is the problem that I've had with a lot of the series that they've had on Disney Plus where Star Wars is concerned, is that you don't, and even a little bit to a degree, like say The Rise of Skywalker, you don't feel that sense of, I mean, in some cases you did, so I don't want to be completely unfair to this episode, but in a situation like this, you didn't feel any real drama or sense of conflict or danger. It's just because they didn't.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're dropped, you're like kicked out of the Star Destroyer. This Star Destroyer is like the only link to food, shelter, all this stuff. You're out in the middle of some strange planet somewhere, like across the known galaxy. Like they've never seen this place before. And she was so nonchalant about it.
Exactly.
You know, that I have to admit, that did take me out of it a little bit.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, and that was the thing. It was just like, the heck, man. And then you're like you said, you know, she's all shooing away like, oh no, you left me at the first sight of death. Like, okay, when those little creatures do, they look like something from 300. That's what they kind of look like, those warriors.
It was very influenced by Samurai, actually.
Yeah, I could tell.
I'm not sure what they were supposed to be. I mean, it would have been great if they brought the Nogri into
Mm.
current canon. I don't think that's what that was. Just like the little turtle people rock or whatever,
That was so stupid to me. It's like another porg thing, It's like, oh,
They were
what
kind of
cute little.
No, actually, you know what they reminded me of? They reminded me of not the porg, but like those little like women things that were
Oh, that was at Octo.
on Octo, yeah. That was really you just
Yeah,
put shells on them and that's what that was.
exactly. Like so I thought that was kind of lame. And it's like they're always doing. I mean, at least with the Ewoks, it's like okay, they're teddy bears, but at least they were warriors. At least they were kind of little vicious little things. When you look at porgs, it was just kind of like, all right, these things are a little cute, but it's like,
Well, they tried to do the parallel, right? I mean, you could see that when Sabine was talking to that one, it was so like a
like Wicked.
redo of, Leia and Wicket. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
they were so obviously ripping off that scene. And that was another
And
thing
the
that
fact
I'm
that they're
like,
trying to, they can talk to each other and they automatically understand. I mean, it was just like, okay,
yeah, I
like,
know. I mean, there was a lot of lamity. If I could like invent a word in that part of it.
mhm.
I mean, one of the things that I did notice though was I guess in this episode there was enough cool stuff that sort of overrode the things that were like, I don't know if I'm really into this or not.
Well, just like when she finally did like find Ezra, like to me that's the part that was anticlimactic to me. Like it was just so he's just standing there chilling on the side of a hill, like, hey, glad you made it or something. Like I wanted there to be a struggle for her to find Ezra. I really wanted her to
Well, that's
find
it,
him, like,
right? There's no struggle. I mean, struggle was
yeah,
actually the word I was looking for. There's no struggle to do anything. Like the actual reunion part, I really didn't have a problem with. Actually, I thought it was somewhat heartwarming and it was nice. And it was nice that they didn't overdo it. It was nice that it was just the way it was. But my problem, though, which is what you're talking about, is that there was no struggle. It was just, it
but
very much was like the whole dagger thing in Rise of Skywalker. It was just, everything
yeah.
just fell into place. We're going to
Well,
go
even
like
the
10
reunion
feet.
part though. But even the reunion part that bothered me was okay, she's been like agonizing over finding Ezra. She finally sees him and she's just kind of like a slight smirk. Like she didn't run, like there was no real excitement or tears or just like
Yeah, it was a
I've
little
missed you
bit
so much. Like
deadpan
it was just
almost. Yeah, it was just
yeah, it was
like,
just kind of
oh.
like, oh, there you are. Like, what? That's what I'm saying. Like anticlimactic, man. It's just like,
Well,
oh my
here's the other
god.
thing you got to look at too, that you got to frame this. You're in a strange galaxy. You have no idea where you are. You're all alone. You're stranded. You finally find a familiar face. It seems like that would generate way more emotion. Because again, I mean, she's just like too calm about this whole thing. It's like
Yeah.
you're stranded. You don't know whether there's food, water, like nothing. You're just stranded. Like I didn't have a problem with the fact that they found these little rock turtle people or whatever it was. Okay, fine, whatever. I mean, sure, there's some issues here and there. Okay, you're ripping off Return of the Jedi a little bit. Okay, whatever. You're just trying to remind us, give us a little fan service, warm and fuzzies. All right, fine.
Mhm.
I can overlook that to a point if it's not too on the nose. It it almost was, but it wasn't to the point to where I was like angry about it, I guess. But yeah, I did think it was a little strange that when you look at Sabine, and I'm not even just talking about like some of the overall, if you just take this series and look at the way that she was acting about Ezra in the very beginning of this show, like in episodes
Mhm.
1, 2, or 3 or whatever, it it's not the same. You expected, it's kind of like what you
Right.
were saying, you expected more emotion, and
Yeah.
you're like in this strange part of the galaxy that you've never been to, and you finally find a familiar face. It's like, they were acting like they were, well, like what they were on a soundstage. And it's
Well, yeah, they just acted as almost as if like he was just on the other side of the planet or something. I'm like, oh, well, you seen him? Oh, here he is.
yeah.
Like, and that's what I'm saying. There was no struggle with that. There was no emotion with her or him. He was just like, well, I knew you'd come. It's like, like both of these guys are kind of way too comfortable with, like, oh, I see my friends found you. It's just,
I know. And it was kind of like even with Ezra's thing, it's like, how did you know? I mean, I
I
guess
mean,
they
I get
were
it, maybe the force or whatever, but
either that or it
my
was just kind of like, okay, well, they've been through so much in Rebels and all this stuff. It's kind of like maybe that's a little bit of their nonchalant attitude. But it just, again, it was almost like, what episode was it? Was it 3? Which one were Ahsoka and Sabine were sort of replaying the New Hope thing where they're in the gunner thing, they're being chased by TIE fighters, that kind of thing?
that was 3.
So, you remember one of the criticisms that we were
Oh,
talking
no,
about
that
with
was,
that one?
yeah, those 3.
Yeah, I think it was 3. It doesn't even matter. The point is it was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
scene in the show, right? So, one of the things was they were trying to redo the whole A New Hope scene, but when you really compare the two, A New Hope had real tension and danger and a sense
hmm
of, whereas it was almost like they were just going through the motions, like they weren't in any real danger. It's like, oh yeah, her shields are down to like 10%. I'm like, really? Because that's a problem. I mean, it's if your shields are
Right.
down to 10% and the ship keeps firing on you, you should have maybe a little bit more emotion than what you
Yeah.
have. And that's the problem. They're just going through the motions. It's almost like, don't worry, the script says we'll be fine. That's basically what they're doing here. And that's
Right.
pretty much what the sense I got from this
We got,
episode, too.
yep.
All right. So Ronaldo says, pretty much, yeah, I love the alien tribe. The alien tribe wasn't bad in and of itself, but I do think, as we brought up, there were some issues with it. Ronaldo goes on to say, I want one of those giant horse rats as a pet. They were kind of cool. I have to admit, I did enjoy it. And actually, I think, because it was like some sort of wolf thing or whatever. I mean, Star Wars is just like obsessed with wolves and whales. That's like their thing, since Disney took over. Dragonfly Mass says, Balin is sleeping on Ezra and might regret that when they meet. Well, I do like the fact that I don't think I put this in my notes. I haven't consulted my notes yet, which is probably a good thing right now. I'll obviously blow through them later on, but it's good that the conversation is actually going this way. The thing about it is that he referred to Ezra as oh man, what was the term he used? It was basically meaning like the fighting with the wooden stick thing. And what he was referring to with whatever that term was he wasn't a real Jedi. He was just like one of these guys. It's basically kind of like a slang thing for what happens when they were trained after Order 66 outside of the temple. They didn't get a proper Jedi education, and so Balin doesn't take them seriously. Is
Yeah, he's
essentially
almost
what
like
that is.
he's almost like a bastardized Jedi in a
Yeah,
way.
pretty much.
Essentially.
Yes. Yes.
If for all
It's
intents
kind
and
of like,
purposes.
okay, it's like whatever. He's sleeping on him right now because he honestly doesn't consider him a threat.
Mhm.
Now, Thrawn, of course, when he was addressing Balin, which I also thought was a really cool scene, and he addresses him as General Balin Skull, it was kind of like, okay,
Mhm.
Thrawn knows who this guy is or was, and through that, we're getting a glimpse into who he is or was. And so you're getting a little bit more a piece of the puzzle, but it's also interesting because one of the things that's unfolding is that, yes, you're seeing more of kind of how these guys would view the post Order 66 Jedi, people that weren't necessarily trained properly. He would probably almost view Luke like that, probably, unless, of course, he knew who he was, and very quickly. I mean, he probably knew he's the one that defeated Vader and the Emperor, so I'm sure he would take him more seriously. But it's It's one of those things, I think. Ronaldo says, I agree. I
Especially his
think,
last name is Skywalker.
yeah, exactly. I mean, he knows who he is. I think Babylon might have the best dialogue. I think he means Balin.
Babylon.
Have the
It's
have
like
the
a total
best.
David thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I just completely disregard the name. Yeah, no, I would agree. I would say that Balin. Another thing you can't sleep on is Huang. I love the fact that he starts the story a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It was kind of a nice.
That was cute. I was like,
And not only was it cute, but it actually served an in-story purpose, because part of what they were talking about when it came to this, galaxy that they're in now. Not sure if it's really the unknown regions or if it's just, but wherever they are, right? It's like Balin alludes to it too, that it was, look, this is like folklore. And now we're seeing it unfold, and it's actually real, and this is a thing. And that's really what this whole thing is alluding to. In fact, some people actually have the idea that this is pretty much like the real story, like what a lot of people thought was fables and stuff like that. This is what actually happened. And so Wang's setting that up is more than just a, hey, let's get the warm and fuzzies because he said a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I mean, this is, in fact, one of the other things that was floated by, which I thought was really interesting, is when Huang's basically referenced the history of the galaxy parts 1, 2, and 3, they were saying what that was actually in reference to was the prequels, the original trilogy, and the sequels. Of course, the sequels, obviously hadn't appeared yet, but that's
occurred yet.
Basically what they're talking about. And then, of course, the first one was the best or something like that. It's like okay. Now, Dwight poses an interesting thing. He says, well, that's that. Uh-oh. My chat's like going, oh, yeah, my chats are going crazy again. Dwight basically says, Balin clearly didn't come for Thrawn. And that is an interesting point, is the fact that Balin's thing is a little bit different than Morgan's thing or anything like that.
Yeah, because you say he's looking for something bigger.
Yes, he's looking for something bigger. He's looking for something. The other thing is what the theory is right now is that he's looking for the world between worlds. What he wants to do, in a way, it's actually ripping off the plot of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, because what Balin seems to want to do, go into the world between worlds, kind of go back to when the Jedi were still the thing.
In prominence, yeah.
And write it, do it differently to where they don't fall, and Order 66 doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's why I said I love the exposition that when Shin asked, like, well, do you miss it? Do you miss the Order? And he was just like, well, there's parts of it, or the idea, the concept of it, that I miss. Just the execution of it was bad, and much like a lot of Star Wars things, that's
yeah, exactly. You might as well have been talking about the actual project, right?
Right.
I miss the concept. The writing's cool, but the execution not so much.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I'm really curious to see how, and it just sucks because I think that, going forward now, because Ray Stevenson passed, unless they replace him with somebody, you're going to have to alter what you were probably going to do for season 2 a little bit with him, because now you don't have him anymore. So, and then you're going to have to try to explain what happened to him in universe.
Well, we'll have to see where it ends, though. We'll have to see where we end up with Balin's character at the end of this season, because
does he make it out of this season? If he never makes it out of it, season 1,
problem
I
solved.
mean,
I
that's
mean, it,
problem
you know,
solved.
kind of
Yeah, I
sucks
mean,
to say
it
it that way,
sucks. Yeah, exactly. But
but you know,
if we're talking about
reality,
from just
right?
if we're talking about just from the story perspective, then yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Dragonfly Mask says it still had the wounds from Purgle Grass. Great details. Ronaldo says, I think this is based on George's original plan for the sequels. He wanted to have stormtroopers that survived the war and still wanted to serve the Empire. I mean, in a lot of cases, though, this is really more like Heir to the Empire stuff, to be honest. It's not even so
mhm.
much George's thing. This is like, we're now getting into Timothy Thrawn's vision a little bit. And
Timothy Thrawn.
yeah, Timothy Zahn. Zahn. Um, yeah, it's an easy one. Hey, it's late, guys. You know, it's
I
getting,
know.
getting close to midnight here. Um, yeah, Timothy Zahn's original plan, because that was one of the things. I mean, even if you notice a lot of so there's a lot of little imagery, right? With Enoch's thing, his mask, that gold part is actually based
Mhm,
on the Roman funeral masks.
mhm,
Um, Actually, they based a little bit of this on in history. There's this thing, the Lost Legion, that pretty much like there was a lost legion of Roman troops or something like that, and I think they turned up in, I don't know, I forgot what like European country they ended up turning up in, or at least they were rumored to have. Um, but it was based quite a bit on that. They've taken a lot of like Roman and some Greek stuff and everything, and they've morphed it, because Enoch was not he was not an heir to the Empire, Zahn trilogy character or whatever. He was basically invented for this, but they're doing that. A lot of the like the red wrappings or whatever that you see, it's a little bit of the Night Sister thing being incorporated into the stormtroopers, like you said. They're a little bit dirtier, grimier. Thrawn has some like tears in his uniform. I mean, they're trying to show you that, yeah, these guys have been in exile for a while. It's not neat and pristine and clean. They've been surviving out there. Let's see what else we got. Ronaldo says the witches were very cool. They were. They were actually very cool. I thought that was kind of a nice thing. White says, I don't think Thrawn will be the big bad for some reason. I almost get the feeling he is the boss before the final boss. Kind of like what we thought about Vader before the Empire. There are rumors that Palpatine is going to make his appearance at some point. In fact, that because of the whole World Between Worlds thing, I mean, anybody can pop up, right? But what do you think about that? Do you think that Thrawn is the final guy, or do you think that maybe we do see, because at some point they do have to try to, whether they do it in this show or The Mandalorian or something, they got to show the transition from the Empire remnants, because that's what's
to the
left
First
here.
Order.
And yeah, to the First Order, exactly. I mean, there's only 30 years. I mean, you say only, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they got 30 years, and actually before that, because you have to assume that when you see The Force Awakens, which is 30 years roughly after the events of this, that the First Order's been there for a while. It's not like they just popped up. So, you got to think maybe, I don't know, like 20 years or something.
I don't want to see Palpatine in this.
Oh, I don't either.
I think it would cheapen it.
Completely.
And because he can't be the saving grace and everything. Like, okay, we saw him because he really wasn't supposed to be in the sequel trilogy, honestly. But okay, he's there now. As canon is over and done with. I think that making Thrawn, because once again, if you're going to be able to move beyond the Skywalker saga, you're going to have to start to tell stories outside of that, and people have to get used to that. That you can't just pull Thrawn. I mean, not Thrawn, but the Emperor out of your proverbial butt every time. Oh, okay, we need a bad guy. Like, he's not, Michael Myers or anything like that. So it's like, okay, yes, we do know that, like, okay, you're dealing with a time span that takes place between the end of the Return of the Jedi and before the sequel trilogy, and there's about 30 years in the process of that. I mean, within this, who knows? Because quite frankly, you could have it where, okay, this ends maybe 10 years later or something like that. And then it's like, okay, or 5 years later, who knows how long, Thrawn's reign is going to be. And then you could now start having the events of like the New Republic has started. I mean, yeah, the New Republic is already taken charge because we've seen it already. And so of course, there's going to be remnants of the Empire who's trying to circumvent that, and then that's when you start to bring in the First Order. So I don't want to see, long or the short, I just don't want to see Palpatine in this. I mean,
No, but here's
if
the
you want to make
problem.
mention of him, if you want to make mention of him, sure.
Well,
Okay,
maybe.
if Thrawn wants to talk about him, like, yeah, the Emperor once, thought about, was exploring out here or whatever, if you make references and stuff like that to him, that's fine. But like to have him show up, no.
Well, and the thing is, the problem is they brought the Emperor in. It's a thing we have to deal with now. The Emperor's whole plan the whole time was he was resurrected. He's pulling the strings the whole time. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's what they introduced. And so you have to deal with that. Now,
Right.
obviously, since he didn't really make himself known until episode 9, you could really make the argument that it would actually make more sense for Snoke to appear first, because he was
That
kind
would
of the
make sense.
stand-in. That would make a little
That
bit
would
more
make
sense.
sense. Yes, I would be okay with that. Yes.
Yeah. But, again, you really don't know what's transpiring between these 20 years or whatever. So, I mean, I guess you have to figure that out, right? Dwight said those things sounded like Jawas. I assume he means the
little turtle people.
Either the turtle people or the other ones. They're actually speaking the same language, honestly. The turtle people and the samurai guys. And yeah, I could see that actually. Dwight goes on to say, as Thor once said, Eric, all words are made up.
That's true.
It is true. Ronaldo says, I can understand that it felt sudden. Still, it worked well for me. I do agree that it needed to have more emotion. He's talking about the reunion between Sabine and because a lot of that's why I like to get to these comments as soon as I can, because a lot of times they're referencing stuff we talked about. I don't want to wait. I mean, because as all these Ronaldo comments happened 18 minutes ago, so I'm trying to get through these quickly. Especially because, as far as Sabine is concerned, Ahsoka died in this journey. That's another good point, though, is the fact that she's not yet aware that Ahsoka is not dead. Now, that's something that, we get to, which is another problem I had. It's like how everybody's feeling Ahsoka's on her way. It's like, how do you know that? I mean, I get it.
Well, Ezra thought that. Ezra thought, I think because Ezra's unaware, because I think that's when Sabine, he made the comment to Sabine that oh yeah, well, Ahsoka's on her way or something like that. And you see Sabine I don't want to tell him just yet because I don't want to ruin this moment,
Well, it's more the Knights, because again, Sabine thinks that Ahsoka's dead. She doesn't know that Ahsoka's alive. Ezra doesn't even know. He just wants to know how they even got there. I'm really more referring to the Night Sisters, how they're sensing, somebody, they're like, Ahsoka. It's like, how do you know Ahsoka? It could be anybody. It's like you assume that Ahsoka died, so how do you know it's Ahsoka? These are the kinds of things that bother me, that are kind of like plot devices to, move things forward.
Well, they kind of can see into the future. That's part of their thing. So they could kind of see her that would make sense.
If they could see her. But even Yoda once said that the future's clouded. He couldn't even see whether or not people would live or die in Cloud City. And that was only taking place, maybe hours or days or whatever before. I mean, see, this is what I mean. They changed the rules to make room for their stories.
Well, that's at that time, though, it was being clouded, though.
Yes, that's true.
But
still, they didn't know. But again, it's a convenience thing. Like, I would agree with that if it was across the board, whatever. But it becomes a little
Well,
esoteric when they don't want you to, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know.
well, I just think that with the Night Sisters, from what we've seen in Clone Wars and in Rebels, we've seen them use their magic to look into, the future and or to see certainly, because they knew when people like were showing up on their planet, like they knew exactly who it was. They kind of they kind of had things kind of scouted out a little bit because and these aren't just like the regular witches. These are like the grand poobah of
Well,
Daphne,
sure.
and they call
I
them
mean,
like
even Palpatine was a little
godmother
scared
or
of them
whatever.
and stuff. I mean, it's like, I
Yeah, I mean,
get
so
that.
it's like, yeah, so it's kind of one of those things where and it's a different part of, because you can't really say the witches have the Force, because we don't even know if they're really alive truly, or they just spirits, because they're
No, they're
dealing with all
alive.
this
We know
witchcraft.
this. We know this based on the expanded universe and other things. Now, granted, I mean, what they do with them in the new canon, I don't know. I can tell you that anytime they've appeared in Rebels, Clone Wars, some of the novels that are the new canon novels that they appeared in, by all, I mean, I guess by all, intents and purposes, they're pretty much the way they were in the expanded universe, which means they are alive.
Mm,
But,
okay.
I don't know. Dwight, Dragonfly Mask, these guys all correct us. Well, not correct us, but the Bakken Jedi. That's
A Boken, yeah.
yeah. That's the term of these
That
guys that were not trained in the temple, but I
yeah.
guess it's almost sounds Yiddish. Uh, David joins us. He says hello. Sorry, I'm late. Ronaldo basically says Balin's cycle speech was very interesting. I mean, actually, all of Balin's speeches were really interesting. To me, he's kind of the MVP of this episode. If I had to give it to somebody, I mean, besides of course Thrawn. Thrawn's incredible. But I really enjoyed the whole Balin storyline in this.
Yeah, I think Balin's kind of the MVP of the whole series, kind of, if you really be
I
honest.
kind of
Like
gave
between
that to
him and,
Huang, honestly.
well, Huang is, but I'm just saying, like, when we're talking about
Well, yes,
like
that's true. Because
sheer
anything,
acting
yes,
and
Balin, right. No,
like from
you're
the
right.
time he comes on, he's like he captivates. Like when
He does.
was on that ship and he started choking people, I was just like,
Yep.
all right.
No, he definitely is. And he's the guy that every time I see him, I'm kind of like, ooh, it's kind of like your ears perk up a little bit or whatever. Let's see what else we got. Dragonfly Mass says, one could say being trained outside the temple makes stronger Jedi. Luke, Leia, Rey, Cal Kestis, Ezra. Well, I mean, Luke and Leia are like descendants of the Force, though. I mean, it didn't matter if they were in the temple or out of the temple. They're going to be like immensely powerful anyway. But
True.
when you talk about Rey, when you talk about Cal Kestis, I mean, Rey was a descendant of
Kanan,
Palpatine. Well, Kanan was trained in the temple. He just never made it beyond the Padawan level before he finished his training.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think, but to that point, I think this is what Balin is talking about, is that like I understand where Dragonfly is coming from. Is the problem is the structure of the Jedi Order, and it doesn't allow it, because it has so many different rules in place. It doesn't allow you to fully. I won't say it doesn't allow you to. It stifles your growth in the Force a lot, because there's so many checks and balances that it's like, all right, it just takes you a lot longer to get to that point, as opposed to, like, I mean, of course, we know the dark side is the quick and easy path, but where's the middle ground?
Well,
What I
here's the
mean? And I
problem with
think,
the Jedi Order. I'll tell you what the problem is right away. It's the same thing with schools, right? If you're teaching
mhm,
somebody individually, you can tailor something to that individual learning style, that individual needs, individual everything. When you're
mhm,
coming up with a curriculum that has to train a wide variety of people. Now you got to start going common denominator. You have to start hitting people where it's common. You can maybe give people aid where they need it or whatever, but now you're structuring it to the group versus the individual. And whenever you do that, there's going to be issues because, you get, I mean, how many times have you seen it? We've both been in education. You get the one guy who's accelerated and he's not being challenged by the curriculum because he's just advanced from it. You got to train to where the most people are. It's the same thing as radio, right? Everybody goes. Why do we keep hearing the same songs every hour? It's because most people want to hear this stuff, right? You have to go for where the group is versus the individual. Yes, majority. So when you're dealing with the Jedi in this case, post-Jedi Order, you're talking more individualistic training versus group training. And that's why I think that you're producing a lot of this stuff. Now, Dragonfly has a couple of interesting follow-ups to this. He says, but Baylan is blinded by his ego or self-perceived purpose. And that's probably where, because again, when you're looking at the speech that he gives, right? And he gives I think 2 major speeches in this whole thing when he's talking to Shin. And he's revealing a little bit more about his motivations, why he's doing what he's doing. Because you could tell, and we brought this up like an episode or 2 ago, where Baylan's not evil like Palpatine or Vader or any of these guys. In fact, when he was talking about Ahsoka needing to be stopped, it was like he was almost, downtrodden about it. He was kind of like, oh, there's so few of us left and, that kind of thing. And he's really blinded, like you said, more on his purpose and what he thinks. And of course, he does have that quest for power, though. But I don't know. I think that it's going to be interesting to see where that storyline goes. Do you think he turns?
I think well, it depends. I mean, like I said, it just depends on if because he's only got 2 episodes left.
That's what I'm saying. See, that's the thing. It's like we got 2 episodes to go. Now, we don't know how long they're going to be either. Because, I mean, another thing you got to look at is, well, okay, so the season finale is probably going to be like an hour maybe. But, is episode 7 going to be like 35 minutes or is it going to be like 55 minutes? I mean, a lot of that is really going to depend, I think, on where they want to go with this. Oh, David,
yeah, I mean,
David.
Uh-oh. What'd he say now? Oh, another letdown. Wow.
So here's my question to David. I mean, speaking of individualized training.
Yes, he definitely does need
yeah, right? Exactly. So my question for you, David, is what exactly do you want? Like, how could this episode let you down? Like, again, I mean, I don't know. You may have missed. You were a little bit late, right? But I mean, before Darryl jumped on, I covered maybe the first 3-5 minutes, whatever it was of the show. And one of the things that I said was that, hey, look, it's not a perfect episode. There's problems in there, but I mean, to say another letdown, I mean, again, I think that one of the things that episode 6 has in common with episode 5 is now Ahsoka is finding its footing. It's not just an enjoyable, fun show, but there's a little bit of meat on this bone. It's giving us some of the things that we want. Now, again, I also have to look at it from the perspective that he might be looking at it from. Because, again, I've been in this game, well, since 1977. But I jumped on the expanded universe pretty much right away. When Heir to the Empire first came out back in 1991, I was reading it. I was enthralled with the character of Thrawn. I'm like, wow, here's a guy. Because it's like, once you have Palpatine and Vader, where do you go? To me, that was the biggest challenge. If this expanded universe that was brand new at the time was going to survive, well, you got to come up with a new villain. Well, how do you top that? And they managed to do it. I I mean, Timothy Zahn actually wrote a very cool character in Thrawn. He's very methodical. He's not maniacal. He's strategic. He's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes of this galaxy in a way. He's looking at their art and all that stuff to, figure out where their weaknesses and strengths are. All kinds of cool stuff, right? So you have to take into consideration that those of us who have been waiting, I don't know, like 30 years or something for this will probably, maybe, in your defense, David, overlook some of the other issues.
I think David's biggest thing is this, because he and I talk about a lot of the stuff off camera. And he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but
I'm sure.
David is very black and white. It's either it is or it isn't. He really doesn't like gray areas or things in the middle.
Uh-oh.
Two, right. Two, and with that, to that point, he looks at things like, okay, if you're an actor, like, so for example, if you're the main character and you're not, okay, a person that's deserving of like our attention, like in other words, like with Ahsoka being so wooden, so just not being portrayed in the best way, it's a flop to him, because it's like, well, the show is about her and she's a weakened character, or she's portrayed weakened, then by all intents and purposes, it's like, okay, like he likes Balin because he feels like Balin can act, and Balin does bring a gravitas to the show. But he feels like, okay, certain characters aren't really acting well, or so it's kind of like, well,
okay,
by all intents and purposes, the black and white determination is the show sucks.
I'll give a good answer for this. It's a really good analogy. It's one of the things you have to learn when you're a musician. So we'll take bass for example,
which he is. So this
okay,
we'll work with him.
All right. So when you're a bass player, this is true with the other instruments too, but bass it really is. This is something I had to learn as a bass player, and then working with major label producers and stuff like that, because I was fortunate enough to work with some. And essentially what happened is you work all this time getting like this amazing bass tone, right? You work on your tone, and it just sounds incredible. And then you go in, you record with these guys, and they mess with they do all this stuff. And then if you solo your tone, if you isolate your bass in the mix, it sounds terrible. Terrible. And you're kind of like, dude, what are you doing? I had dialed in this super amazing bass tone. But then when you actually learn about mixing and music and stuff like that, it's like, yes, you did. But see, the problem is your amazing bass tone is including frequencies that are stepping on the guitar player and the drummer and all this stuff. So what you do is you're getting the tone that sounds amazing with the entire mix, not just the isolated performance. Acting is very much the same way. You always hear about things like the ensemble cast. One of the things of, if a TV series is going to go for a long time, you'll hear the ensemble cast. Now, there's some exceptions. Like when we talk about Frasier, the cool thing about Frasier and some of the other shows that were kind of like that is you could take each one of the characters in that show and make a spin-off of them, and it would be good, because the characters are that well developed. However, there are other shows where the characters are not made to be isolated. It's how they work in tandem with everybody else. So the whole Ahsoka performance, even we were wondering, why is she so emotional? Why is she? Because it's not really the way Ahsoka was when you watch, say, the Clone Wars and even Rebels. But then you realize it's because of what's going on in her life at that time. It's because she feels victimized. She feels she left the Jedi Order. It's basically like, look, don't look at Rosario Dawson or Ahsoka individually and isolating this performance from the rest of the actual show. You can't do that. If you do that, it's going to be terrible. You have to look at how it mixes in. Now, I'll be the first person to admit that even when you do that, it's not perfect either, because Filoni, look, he's an animated guy. He's not a live action guy. He's still learning the ropes. He's getting there, and he will get there. He's not there. But when you do look at the overall storyline, it's there. And I'm not saying to excuse bad performances, bad writing, bad direction at all. But I'm saying that you can't just go, okay, I'm just going to look at this and, throw the whole thing away. It's not a good idea. Ronaldo says, if Balin survives, I think he should be recast. The character is too important. So how do you feel about that? Because, Ray Stevenson, man, really defined that role. You could do it. I mean, they did it with Dumbledore in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
When Richard Harris died. But I do think that Harry Potter suffered in a way.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have Christopher Lee to back him up or anything. So,
right? But
that would have been like the next choice. But I mean, like, I think.
Oh man, that's a good point. He is kind of like Dooku when you really stop and think about it. That's what I'm saying. Like the Balin and Dooku are very similar, actually.
Almost as if that was his apprentice at one point. That's what I'm saying. It's almost like I would be able to. It would make more sense that Balin was Dooku's apprentice more than Qui-Gon.
Oh yeah,
it's more believable.
Let me do this. Let me throw it out to everybody that's watching right now. That's watching live. I mean, look, if you're watching the rebroadcast like 4 days later or something, chime in the comments, no problem. But for those of you who are watching us live right now, who would you use? Who would you recast? Like, if you had to recast Balin, what actor would you put in his place? Because Ray Stevenson just owns that. Let's see. Dragonfly Mask. This is a bit biblical, but Enoch became Metatron, and Metatron speaks for God. Well, I mean, Enoch is an actual biblical. I mean, he's
a name.
He's He's a guy. He walked with God. God's like, you're pretty cool. And just he never experienced death. I mean, that's basically what it was. Right. And Enoch was like really old. So yes, I'm sure that it was no accident that the character is named Enoch for a reason. And Enoch is going to be a very interesting, because he's like the captain. He's kind of like the Captain Phasma. Of this universe. And it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes and who is this guy, because he is an invention of the series, right? Like I said, he is not an expanded universe guy that they ported over. He's an entirely new character, so we have to see where that goes. Dom basically is like, is Luke in this show?
No.
Well, we don't know.
At least not yet.
He's not yet. But he's alive. And this is the problem that they have with Luke Skywalker, actually. It's like, you almost can't have like too much going on without it attracting Luke's attention and it being really weird that Luke's not there. They have to be very careful about this. It's good that they set this like way across, the galaxy, that you need the Purgle or this insane, like the Eye of Sion hyperspace ring or whatever to get to, because Luke's absence could be conspicuous if too much Jedi-ish crap is going on in the galaxy and he's not, like, he's sitting it out. You know what I'm saying? It's like, sure, he's rebuilding his Jedi temple and all that, but I mean, come on, man. I mean, if the fate of the galaxy is over here, you're gonna put your hat in the ring here. Ronaldo says, if you ask me, Thrawn is the final guy. Well, we are asking. We'll see what happens with Palpatine in the First Order at some point, but not now. And I would tend to agree with this. I think it's a little bit too early to bring Palpatine in. Snoke, I could see maybe you putting him in there as like he's... Because you also have to wonder this. How did Snoke do the whole First Order thing? I mean, the comics gave us a little bit of a glimpse into how Snoke, which is kind of like this normal Hugh Hefner-looking guy, basically seduced Kylo into the dark side. But how did he become so prominent, though? You know, and how did he do the First Order? I mean, Filoni did say, look, we're going to eventually bump up against the First Order with some of these series, but I'm really wondering when they're even going to plant some seeds. Dom goes on to say, Luke would destroy Thrawn. Well, yes.
Yeah.
But not necessarily, because Thrawn even knew how to... See, the thing is, Thrawn knows how to manipulate, and he knows how to get himself out of trouble. And by the way, Thrawn is a very formidable fighter and opponent. So, do I agree that Luke would destroy Thrawn? Absolutely. But it wouldn't be the massacre that you would think it would be. Ronaldo says, it's kind of weird that all of this is happening and Luke is doing who knows what and who knows where. I mean, again, that's the issue that you do face when you start to do too much of this stuff and you have a Luke Skywalker there. I mean, how do you think that they're going to explain that?
It's kind of hard. I mean, like, the only way I can see... I mean, well, first of all, this is all taking place in the unknown regions right now, so that at least you kind of have that on your side at the moment.
It's the only thing they do, but I mean, once it goes back into the universe proper, though...
Yeah, then once you get to that point, you know, I mean, you could always say it was force led, like, okay, he felt in the force, you know, or, you know, it's like, okay, the force was telling... he knew about it, but the force was telling him to go on and continue what he's doing or whatever. And then, you know, Ahsoka kind of just picks up the reins.
Well, here's another thing you could do. You could also say that Ahsoka talked to Luke and said, look, I got this. Don't worry about it. If I need you, I'll call you. Continue to find other Jedi and, you know, rebuild the Order. I mean, there is always that possibility, and they could rely on that. You know, whether they do that or not. Okay, so now David, of course, I love when David describes... I mean, I look forward to this. I have to say it. I do. I look forward to this every week. This is why I like it when David chats in. So here it comes. He says, you're right. The Blue Smurf was an amazing character. He was acting his butt off. Definitely not a wasted ink pen. And then, of course, Dom says, I agree with David, but for me, all Star Wars shows are a flop. Well, I mean, I could... Look, again, they're not the films. In some cases, like I think with The Mandalorian and probably only The Mandalorian, I would say The Mandalorian has been consistently... Maybe you can look at season 3 and go, well, I don't know. I think that they're starting to drop the ball on that. But the first 2 seasons, I would say, other than maybe Rogue One, possibly Solo, they're probably more solid. Now, again, you and I have talked about how The Last Jedi was an amazing film. However, it had a lot of problems. You know, that's the problem, is anytime that the Disney Star Wars films, namely the sequel trilogy, does anything compelling or cool or whatever, it's always like 2 steps back with some of the issues that they have. So there is that. No, Dwight. Dwight says Connery is a replacement. How old is Sean Connery? He could be Balin after his starvation diet or something. Kidding, of course. Okay, yeah, because he's deader than Ray Stevenson. But you know what? He would have been. Like, had he been alive, yeah, he would have been a great replacement, actually, for Ray Stevenson.
Honestly, you know who could play him? It's funny because we mentioned him already. Kelsey Grammer.
Oh. Yeah.
Kelsey Grammer, like let him grow that beard out again, like, or like put him in like he used to dress up like Sigmund Freud on Frasier or whatever.
No, yeah, no. You know what?
I mean,
Well,
because
even
he's
thinking of
got
the
the
way,
height.
sure, he's got
Well,
the height.
like,
He's
he's
got
got the
the
height. He's got the side, the build. He's got
yep.
the acting chops. I mean, he can do a little bit of everything. Dominic Purcell probably could do it. If you guys remember the movie Blade Trinity, he's the one who played Dracula, I believe.
Yes, that's another one.
But he could do it.
Ooh, Ronaldo threw out a good one. Ronaldo says, "I'll throw out a name. I'll recast with Charles Dance. Charles Dance is another great choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good." So
Yeah.
Dwight says, "I wasn't saying Palpatine was the overarching guy. I was thinking the source of the power Balin here is calling out. Maybe. I mean, look, anything. It's Star Wars, man. Anything's possible, right?" Dragonfly says Thrawn used to wear Cortosis armor and that blocks lightsabers. Yeah, he did. He also had these little creatures called the Asalamari, which were like these little like
iguana looking
chameleon,
things.
or chameleon iguana looking things that would also become like vacuums in the Force. So the Force wouldn't work on them. So the expanded universe Thrawn had some extra things that were cool. And look, we don't know. I mean, we're coming up on the end of the season for Ahsoka. Now, we don't know how many seasons they plan to go with Ahsoka. How long are they going to drag out this Thrawn thing? But there could still be some time to bring in some expanded universe stuff when it comes to him. We just don't know. Ronaldo goes on to say, "I love Enoch's mask. I think he bought it at the Darth Mall." Oh, man. All right.
Wow.
Wow,
Ronaldo.
wow. I mean, come on, dude. It's like
I'm
it's late, man. You can't do this. All right. So Dom says The Mandalorian was a flop. Not true. I would say maybe the last season. I wouldn't argue with that, but the first 2 seasons were on point. So it was extremely boring. I guess it depends on what you're looking for in Star Wars. I would say I could see people making that argument with Andor. I don't necessarily see people making that argument with The Mandalorian, but, I don't know. Maybe if there was a little bit of setup. Ronaldo agrees. He says, "Ooh, Kelsey Grammer is a good option." And then David comes up with Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe's another one that would be a very good option, actually.
Good option, yeah.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. So there are options if they do want to continue the Balin character. And I think depending on, where they go with it, depending on the fate, because like you said, Balin could end up dying at the end of this whole thing, and we don't know. It really just depends on whether or not they want to continue. I don't know, like if they want to maybe, like if they wrap up his quest now versus having it go for a little bit, and maybe he becomes a philosophical difference than some of the other Jedi. Like he can stand opposed to that, because right now, you have Luke, you have Ahsoka, you have people that pretty much, I mean, maybe not so much Ahsoka, but, Luke especially. It might be an interesting thing if you had another Jedi that had a different opinion. Dom says, he literally just traveled all over protecting a little kid. There's like a new storyline every episode. Until the last episode in season 1. But I mean, he was building up to a certain point, though. It's like, this is the problem, is that you have to look at these things more like, I don't know, like 6-hour movies or something. It's pretty much a storyline that goes on, but not even like a TV series, right? It's really more like a movie broken up into individual episodes. So I could see where maybe if that didn't appeal to you, you could say, all right, I don't know, I'm sort of checked out of this.
I
All
mean, also Dominus like 12.
right. Let me see. I just want to get to some of these notes before, I end up forgetting or whatever, because I want to make sure I got everything covered. It's like, look, I wrote these things down. I want to make sure I got them covered, right? And of course, chats are still coming in, and I want to get to those. But so yeah, I brought up the conversation between Huang and Ahsoka. I actually enjoyed the dialogue between the two, and of course, the fact that he ends it with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away thing. But it's basically mirroring the dialogue between Shin and Balin, or if you go to the Obi-Wan episode, that one scene with Obi-Wan and Leia when they were in the back of the transport or whatever. I really like those quiet dialogue-y type scenes that give you a little bit of exposition and move the plot forward, I guess. I've always been a fan of that. Let's see, what else we got? Oh, Peridia, of course. That's the planet that they end up going to. Makes an appearance. It's the home world of the Dathomir witches, and it was a place where Thrawn was exiled. So we see that essentially in the last episode of Rebels. And so it was nice that they brought that back. Of course, Balin's speech, his insight into the past. The shot of the Chimera Star Destroyer coming into view was breathtaking. The stormtroopers, Thrawn's entrance, they all gave a sense of power and menace. I really enjoyed that. That was something that, I gotta switch to that. That's something that I thought was really cool and very effective. I thought that this was a very effective entrance that they gave him. Enoch, of course, was pretty wild looking, and I'm really interested because again, there's a whole Roman funeral mask thing that's referencing the Lost Legion. So there's a lot of historical things that are happening. So I'm wondering if maybe some of this becomes a little bit more literal, less symbolic as this goes on. The conversation between Thrawn and Sabine. That was something we haven't talked about yet, too. I thought that was really cool. Because, again, remember, they had met each other. They knew each other. Right? And I thought that their whole little back and forth and the fact that Thrawn is definitely more of a menace in this. He's a little bit more the way he was in the expanded universe. I thought that was cool. You got any thoughts on the Sabine Thrawn thing?
I just wish Sabine would have I wish there was more tension between the two of them.
You didn't really feel there was tension, huh?
It seemed like she was just trying to be like snarky with him, but like tension in the sense of like, okay, she recognizing how powerful Thrawn actually is.
I think she kind of did. I think the whole snarkiness is more of a cover. I don't necessarily think that it was, because I agree, right? Like the way that they handle it a lot of times in the sequel trilogy, let's say, it's kind of like, okay, you guys are like playing fast and loose with these guys. This is kind of like a thing, Poe, you're all being all sarcastic to Kylo Ren. Not a good idea. You should have a little bit more respect for who you're talking to, and you would think that the character would actually have a little bit more fear. With Sabine, especially because she knew Thrawn from before, I think it was more like bravado, like she was trying to mask her actual. She knew, like this is kind of hopeless. What have I got to lose?
Like case in point, if you look at by comparison, look at the portrayal that Carrie Fisher did when she was up against as Leia when she was against Tarkin. Yeah, exactly. And when Tarkin started walking up on her, she was like, I grow tired of, just that the intensity was just kind of like, okay. She was kind of talking a little flippant at the mouth. But then,
But then she kind of cowered a little bit and she was a little bit.
But then she was like, and she's looking and she's like, okay.
Yeah.
Dantooine, they're on Dan. She's trying to,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like that whole moment was like there was tension there, and with Thrawn being, especially with him, you know, being out there with Ezra. You would think that, like, okay, you might want to.
No. Point taken. Speaking of which, her battle with those like samurai type things, I thought that was cool. I actually enjoyed the battle scenes in this. The rock creature scenes I thought was like kind of a classic Star Wars. Sure, it was a little bit of a ripoff of Return of the Jedi. Actually, it was a lot of a ripoff of Return of the Jedi, but I thought it was a nice callback. Of course, we talked about the conversation between Shin and Balin. I thought that the reunion between Sabine and Ezra was satisfying, but at the same time, as we brought up earlier, I thought it should have played out a little differently.
Yeah, that was real lackluster to me.
Yeah, I mean,
I was disappointed in that. That, like I said, it just didn't. It didn't. I didn't feel it at all. It was just like, oh, here you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, the last scene between Elsbeth and Thrawn, I thought was really menacing too. And then of course the other thing is, what's in those crates that they're loading? Like, what are they?
Weapons.
I mean, I guess it would be. I don't know where they got them from.
Well, maybe they found them on some other planet out there or something.
We'll probably see. All right. So David's got a couple comments. He says, I love how no one said, no, David, you're wrong. Thrawn was amazing like you said he would be. We did. He can really act. We did. He did this well. He did that well. We did. You joined us late. With Rey, I can list all of his star qualities. So again, Thrawn was amazing. Lars Mikkelsen can act. We were gushing the whole time in the beginning of the show about how Thrawn's entrance and everything was incredible. I mean, he's definitely, he's just as menacing, unlike the way they depicted him in Rebels. And I didn't hate the way they depicted him in Rebels, but I thought that they watered him down a little bit, made him a little nicer. In this, they did not. He's every bit as ruthless and everything as he was. He's cunning, he's smart. He is a villain worthy of Palpatine. I mean, I can't heap enough praise on how they did Thrawn's entrance, his portrayal so far. I'm 100% on board, and this is somebody who's been a Thrawn fan since like 1991. Then David, of course, is talking to Dom. He goes, you know what? He's the real one. I guess I'm not in the asylum by myself. Trust me, dude, you don't want to... So, gentlemen, did the show take a turn yet? Darryl said it by now it didn't take a turn, then maybe it's over. Well, he's addressing you. You go first.
It's on.
Don't do too much dead air because you know how much they hate that.
I know how much they hate it. It's on the cusp, man. It's really on the cusp of being good. Like I said, I don't think this is a great show. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think it's a great show. Do I think it's a good show? No, not at this point. I think it's an okay show, all right show. Yes. So can't say that like, oh, this is like the worst thing I've seen on television. No, I won't say that. But I can't put it in like, I can't say it's really good yet. I still can't say it's good. I will say it's okay.
Yeah, I would agree that it's okay. I wouldn't say that it's... I think it's better than it was. I think it's turning around. I think it turned around starting with season 5. I think now you can point to more good than bad. I think a lot of the taste that's in people's mouths is just simply from the first 5. And look, I will restate something that I said in the very opening of this show. And that is, it shouldn't have taken this long to get here.
No, it shouldn't have.
That's the thing. It should not have taken 6 episodes out of 8, mind you, for this show to actually turn around and go, okay, now we're going to be cool. I mean, it should have been here at episode 2 or 3 at the latest.
Right. I think the biggest thing is like, and I've seen this a lot, unfortunately, with a lot of Star Wars stuff. Is like they wait to the latter half of the season to try to capture, to really just like amaze you. But my thing is like you have to get us early, because people are at this point, and when they're watching shows, there's so many other great shows on right now. If you don't capture people early, they're going to turn it off.
Yep.
The only reason why we're so invested in this because we're legit Star Wars fans, and I get it, so we're going to see it through to the end. However, for somebody like David, who's really not a Star Wars person to begin with, it's kind of like, okay, I understand his perspective, because from a person who sits in a place where it's almost like, okay, if I'm not really a person who just loves music to the degree of like I understand music to the point where I can listen to any different type type of music and really get something out of it, whether it's jazz, classical. If I'm only used to listening to hip hop and that's my scope, then anything outside of hip hop, like if it's really not going to catch my attention, I don't care about it. And that's where a lot of people are when it comes. So if you're not a Star Wars fan, I can understand why someone was just like, yeah, this is trash, because it's not really capturing my attention, and you may not know all the little nuances that, Eric,
Right.
myself, Dwight, Ronaldo, Dragonfly,
pretty much everybody
all
else watching this show. But
yes, exactly. But I mean, but like I said, David falls into the category of casual fan.
Well, and we need those people.
Prototype.
We need that, because I'll give you a good example. I'm going to follow up on your music thing, because that's a great analogy, because it would be likened to, somebody who's in hip hop or rap or something. If you get the casual fan, if that's not like their thing or whatever, it's just not capturing. I'm like, okay, this is not for me. Whereas the actual rap or hip hop fan will start to dissect the lyrics and, the cadence and all this stuff, and they'll actually get into it. So even if it's not that great, there's still a lot they're going to get out of it because of the overall genre part of it.
Correct.
Whereas with Star Wars, it's kind of the same deal, right? Because we have the weight and the knowledge and the breadth of this entire franchise. So we're geeking out because of where a lot of these storylines fit. So in a lot of ways, a hardcore Star Wars fan is going to overlook a lot more than the casual fan would, because there's all of these other things that we're getting out of it. If you've never heard of Thrawn before, you're not going to get out of it the same thing we would, because we understand where it fits, so we're like, ooh.
He's looking at it with one lens. He's like, oh, can he act? Okay, cool, I'm invested, like, because he can act. But it's like, okay, but there's so much to that particular character that, you're going to miss because you just aren't as acquainted.
Well, and let me just say this right out the gate. And this is something you and I have talked about. You and I have talked about this off camera, too. A lot of people keep pointing to the acting. It drives me insane. It's not the acting. Look, you guys have to understand what movie making, all this stuff is all about, okay? Actors' jobs are to show up, and whatever the director tells them to do and the script says, they can breathe life into it. Now, it's true that if you do have, like, say, a Harrison Ford, and he goes up to Irvin Kershner and says, dude, Han Solo, after Leia says, I love you, is saying, I love you too. Han Solo wouldn't say that. But that's because Harrison Ford had lived with that character for a while, and he's clued in, and he has the acting chops to go. That character wouldn't say that. Irvin Kershner has the directing chops to say, hey, Harrison, you're right. He wouldn't say that. Let's play it differently. Let's shoot it with the I love you too. Well, let's also shoot it with you saying I know, which is what Harrison wanted to do. It was improvised. And let's keep both. And of course, the best thing, put it in there. You guys have to understand that actors are basically just doing the job that the directors, that's why it's called a director. They're directing the actors. You have to understand that it's like really the the cinematographer and the DP. Those are the ones that are controlling the look. The director's job is to control the actors. So what a lot of people think is bad acting is not bad acting. Well, it may be like bad execution, but a lot of times it's really due more to poor writing and poor direction. That's usually when you have all these name actors. That's why you had like Liam Neeson, Natalie Portman, Ewan McGregor. You had basically like these Oscar-winning or Oscar-nominated actors that were delivering these wooden performances in the prequels. It's not because they suddenly forgot how to act. It's because they were being directed by a guy who doesn't know how to direct actors. So you have to look at that part of it. Let's see what we got here. Dragonfly says, Thrawn has had to hold his own in front of Palpatine quite a few times in the new novels. The guy moves ahead. And yes, that's something that they talk about quite a bit, even in the expanded universe, is that Thrawn is playing chess, where everybody else is playing checkers. He's always a bunch of moves ahead, and you're right. He had to, a lot of times, sort of out-strategize. I mean, not completely, but he's staying up or ahead of Palpatine in a lot of ways. Not really, because if you really read the novels, Palpatine knew what was going on, but he saw Thrawn's value, and he didn't want to end him. Vader wanted to end him at one point, but, they actually had an uneasy alliance. Now, Ronaldo's got a little bit of a different viewpoint. He says, I think it's a good show with some great parts. And again, for me, I would put a comma there and say, but with some major problems. Because I do think it's maybe an okay. If somebody wanted to say it was a good show, all right, whatever, fine. But you can't overlook the problems the show has. And I think that that's the point. The point is a lot of times you almost, and again, it's a subjective thing because look, if it lands with you, it doesn't matter if it's technically great. I mean, look, how many times have we seen like these cheesy B movies or some like bubblegum pop song or whatever that, we just love? I mean, we know it's not good, but we love it, right? Because it has something that appeals to us. So look, if this show has something that appeals to you, great. Enjoy it. Enjoy it with our blessing, actually. Because we're not really hating it. We're okay with it, but it would be irresponsible if we didn't point out the issues too, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so David says, Rey's entrance was like Denzel in The Equalizer, like Morpheus in The Matrix. And I didn't know who Rey was. Is he talking about like Balin, like Ray Stevenson?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because he's spelling it like Rey in the sequel trilogy.
I know.
All right, whatever. It was cool. Thrawn just showed up. Rey has more gravitas than Thrawn, who took 8 episodes to appear. How could you say that he has more gravitas than Thrawn, who's got a bunch of people chanting his name, but again, you also have to look at it like this. He has had more screen time. And if you look at Rey's introduction, Balin's introduction, it's got me doing it. If you look at Balin's introduction was strong. And it was strong because you also had to look at the fact, unbiasedly, that Balin was a new character that we didn't know about. And we became invested in Balin very quickly. Thrawn is more of a legacy character.
It's not even that. Here's the bottom line. Here's why David's all like, freaking out over Balin. The difference is between the two characters is that Balin has the Force. When you first see Balin appear on the screen, he comes in, he's marching in, he's got his hood on, he's force choking people, he's throwing his lightsaber, he's doing a bunch of cool stuff. And it's like he instantly appeals to you like, okay, this is a kick behind bad guy. So it's like, okay, Thrawn doesn't do that. Thrawn comes in.
Thrawn just has this.
Yeah.
Really?
He has the might.
No gravitas. all you hear is
And
Thrawn, 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 right? No gravitas?
yeah, and the fact that, but just the way he walks in, like his hands. I mean, he's doing the whole Ahsoka behind the back thing, but that's how he's always been, though. That's a part
Well,
of his
and
character.
again, the other thing that David doesn't understand. Like, really? Because Thrawn, besides being cunning, dude, the guy's like a hand-to-hand. I mean, he's devastating. He could beat a lot of people.
Yeah, but he doesn't see that yet. He doesn't know that about him yet. And
well,
that's what
yeah,
I'm saying.
and,
It's
and
like,
David,
if you're just comparing entrances, it's like, okay, when Balin shows up, he's like kicking butt, taking names. He's not playing any games. Thrawn just kind of shows up and walks down an aisle. It's like,
I'm sorry. I'm trying to concentrate on what you said, but I got this comment. I mean, I get it. It's funny. But yeah, exactly. I mean, again, a lot of it is context, right? A lot of it is there is a certain amount of that. I get it, but you also have to look at where people are falling in the universe. You can't just have like some, just like love affair with some certain character just because he exhibits a bunch of powers. You have to look at where they fall into the thing, right?
This is the same person who thinks Fast and Furious is like one of the greatest
That's
movies
true.
franchises
That is
of all
true.
time.
Now, see, even though I do enjoy Fast and Furious, but you're right.
You enjoy it, but it's
there's
it's
a
food.
Yeah, there's a credibility thing here. If you think
It's not
Twinkies
winning
are health food,
like Oscar
which is-
for.
yeah, right. You got a point. You got a point. All right. So Ronaldo says, I think it's not better than Mandalorian season 1, 2, or Andor, but it is better than Obi-Wan, Boba Fett, and Mandalorian season 3. That I would probably. So tough. I could go for Mandalorian season 3. I think Mandalorian season 3 is kind of weak. I
I can go for that one. I wouldn't say it's better than Obi-Wan.
No, but I mean, Obi-Wan was riddled with problems.
Now, this is better than Boba Fett. That
yes,
I'll give you.
I will give you that too. And then of course, we got our guy Chad. Late night streams. Yes, very late night streams, I might add. Yeah, I mean, look, it comes down to this, and you have to look at this in the context, because one of the things that Star Wars is doing that I actually will applaud them on is that they are now starting to cater toward a little bit more of the, not just hardcore. I don't really think that you could just go hardcore versus casual. You have to go newer versus longtime fan. When you're a longtime fan and you've consumed all this content over 30, 40 years, okay, you don't want to keep, it's almost like with Batman.
Oh boy.
I know.
Be careful.
I know. I brought it up, but I have to. But this time I think this is something we can all agree on. I think that even you and David can call a truce on this. I think you could both agree with this, right?
Let me go to the dark side on this one. Go ahead.
Batman has been around since what, like the 30s or something?
Yep.
Okay. So how many times do we have to keep seeing the origin story in movies? And their excuse. And Ronaldo sees it. Ronaldo sees it. He is like, you had to use Batman. Look, we all know how the use of Batman does tend to, let's just say, inflame or stir certain conversations here. All right, I get it. I understand. But you guys will see, this isn't... All right, let me put it like this. This should not stir up the pot, okay? Everybody should be cool with this. All right? So here it is. A lot of times, the filmmakers that keep pumping out all these Batman films insist on showing us the origin story because they're like, well, we got to hook in the casual fans. Now, everybody reads the comics. Now, course, my defense was always like, dude, this thing's been around since the 30s. Who doesn't know the origin of Batman? And who couldn't find it out in a simple Google search at this point? Right? Like, you go see a movie, maybe you're picking it up in the middle, and you're like, I wonder how this guy got his start. You could search that. We don't need to see it. Right? Okay, so fine. Now, a lot of the Batman films, and even others, like they did with Superman 2 and Man of Steel and stuff, they're actually starting just, with an adventure. They're not necessarily giving us the origin. Oh, they might reference it or something, or maybe show a flashback or whatever. The point is, they're not taking like the first third of the movie and giving us the origin story. Because they're starting to make the films for the more long-term fans.
Seasoned, yes.
Yeah. Not necessarily hardcore. You do not have to be hardcore. Look, I used to be when I was a kid, very hardcore into the comics. I dealt with them, I traded them, I did all this stuff. Super into them. After that, I had what you would call, especially stuff that came out, in the 80s and beyond. I mean, I had more of a casual knowledge. Like, I would keep up with stuff because I had friends that, had comics or whatever. I would just keep up with it. But I wasn't intimately knowledgeable about the stories like I was in the early 80s, the 70s, that kind of thing. So, again, what the Star Wars is trying to do now is reward the long-time fans. And because of that, you're bringing in stuff now that actually has context. But if you're a casual fan and you're missing that context, I think that's what you're talking about, where some of this stuff will be lost on you and you might be judging it based on a different criteria. And for that, I mean, it's valid. I mean, what can I say? All right, so David Chadson, he says, Fast and Furious is 20 times better than Ahsoka. Fast and Furious isn't great. Fast and Furious starring cast can act better than these amateurs. Tyrese and Ludacris portray their characters better than these chicks and their musicians. Okay.
I'm gonna just let him,
I mean, you know what?
Some people just need therapy and they just need to, get whatever's off their chest, and I get it.
I could suggest some prescriptions that might help.
I wonder if our one of our subscribers.
Oh yeah,
the pharmacist.
There was that one subscriber that's a pharmacist. Yeah. Look, I forgot his name too, because he only chatted in that one day. But if you're watching, David could use your help. But again, I mean, the thing you also have to look at with the Fast and Furious, I don't believe I'm actually getting involved in this conversation, but the thing you have to look at with the Fast and Furious franchise is it's relatively surface, right? It's fairly contained. Yes, they do expand on it in all the movies, and they're adding characters, but I mean, there's like this basic core characters, which was actually true with Star Wars up to a certain point. Now it's like they've expanded it, and I said this a million times in most of the shows that we've done over the past 3, 4, how many ever years it's been. And that is that they're going to get to the point in the franchise when a franchise ages like this one has, and it becomes 30, 40, coming up on 50 years now, right? I mean, in like 4 years, this franchise will be 50 years old. When you have a franchise that's that old, you are going to get to the point where now you're going to start to appeal to pockets. Up until a certain point, like maybe the 90s or 2000s or whatever, everybody was pretty much moving in the same plane because the same generation and a few generations after were growing up and everybody was kind of in the same place with it. But now you have multiple generations, you have different demographics. I mean, you just have, people are just in a different place. And so therefore, certain things are going to start to appeal to people that might not appeal to other fans. So the way that you have to look at Star Wars is like, okay, maybe Ahsoka's not for you. You know, maybe The Mandalorian is, or maybe Andor is, or maybe none of them are. Maybe the movies are what you like. The point is, it's going to appeal to pockets of the fan base. And I think that the best thing that Star Wars can do as a franchise is stay true to the story, continue to advance and create some of the stories that they're creating, and continue to do that, and just let people. It's kind of like in music, right? A lot of times the artists are like, look, we're making albums for us. You know, maybe this album isn't for you. Okay, wait till the next one. But we're not going to cater to what a commercialized audience wants. Because the minute you start to do that, now you're compromising everything. And usually nobody likes it. Let's see what we got here. Ronaldo's got a couple. He says, Fast and Furious is what the Godfather trilogy should have been. Francis Ford Coppola. Oh, he's having some fun with this. He goes, Fast and Furious is awesome, man. Mahatma Gandhi. Don't forget the quote from George Lucas. Fast and Furious is what Star Wars should have been. If only I had thought of it first. Oh, and of course, David. Maybe we'll give David the last word here. David says, Agent Smith in Matrix 3 with all the other Agent Smiths surrounding him. That's gravitas. That's epic. Again, most of Fast and Furious cast aren't great actors. That's the point. They're not great, but still better. Darryl seems to have a rebuttal, even at this late hour. By the way, thanks, guys, for hanging on. You know, there's still a good amount of people that have started out watching this that are still watching this. And at least in the Eastern time zone, here in the good old United States, it's like almost 1 a.m. So you guys are awesome.
Yes, you are. I'm just going to bring this slight thing to the head of this conversation. Okay, so David just says Agent Smith with all his clones are greater gravitas
than this.
Yet, exactly. So you mean the same thing? Basically? I mean, granted, they're not clones of Thrawn, but I mean, like, you have a whole army of
he must have anticipated this, because he said the two scenes are similar. True, he said this before I actually popped this up. But Agent Smith was just better. Was just better? What do you mean? It was just better. What kind of explanation is that?
Well, folks, it's like Eric said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Let me just go ahead and grab my wraps.
I know this is so much fun, though. Man, God bless David. I just, you know, all of you guys, really. Actually, I have to say, man, this chat has been awesome. You guys have been amazing. I might even go as far as like promoting this show, because people have to see this episode. This episode, I think, has been one of the standouts of our show, because it really shows how this community interacts. And I really do. Look, we've gotten a bunch of new subscribers, you know, in the past week or so. And that's great. I think that people really need to see how this community interacts and how we're different. I mean, it's been so cool. I'm not even going to sure, I'll mention the Buy Me a Coffee thing. I'll mention, you know, some of the other ways that you guys could support the show. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that. But, you know, you guys are just so cool. I love the community of people that we've got on this show that are always discussing stuff with us. It's always a lot of fun. This is the thing I look forward to the most. You can, of course, continue this whole thing on our Discord. You got the comment section. If you guys didn't have a chance to see this live, you can certainly add your input into the comments or continue the discussion if you were watching us live. But yeah, this has been a really, really good one. Standout episode. So, okay, before we wrap this up, what do you need to see now in episode 7? We always do this at the end. Well, first of all, you got to rate. Give me the number rating. You guys are watching this, do it too. How do you rate the episode, and what do you want to see in episode 7?
7. And what do I need to see in the next episode? I need to see more. I really need to see like super development, like as far as phenomenal acting between Thrawn, Ahsoka. I need to see growth in Ahsoka. I need to learn more about Ahsoka. I need to learn more about Ezra. Yeah, I just need to learn more about I need to really see a lot of development in 7.
I'll actually go 7.5. I'll give this a little bit higher because I think the standout scenes were standout. I think the problems were major problems, but the standouts were probably standouts. Particularly the end with Thrawn, with the introduction of, you have to understand just how well they really caught the crew of the Chimera, and just, there's a lot of subtle things that I think a lot of people might not have caught that more hardcore fans would, and for that, I'm going to give them a 7.5 that they're definitely paying attention. Okay, it's no surprise. David gives us a 4. Ronaldo gives it an 8.3. Dragonfly gives it staying steady at 7, and need to see some Ezra in action and a flashback about what happened at the end of Rebels, which we could because we have seen some of that. Remember, in this show, they actually did revamp a little bit, particularly in the first couple of episodes. They actually reshot in live action some of the stuff that we saw in the epilogue of the last episode of Rebels. Ronaldo goes on to say, I need to see Ezra's reaction to everything that happened since he disappeared. So I'm gonna mirror a lot of this stuff, right? I mean, yes, everything, right? I need to see more character development. I need to see a little bit more about what Thrawn's plan is, what's in all these crates that he's doing. Ahsoka needs to get into the fray somehow. They might save that for the season finale, episode 8, but I would like to see at least more movement in episode 7. And just, I would like to see a little bit more acting. Not just necessarily improve acting, but a lot of these dialogue scenes, like the scene between Ahsoka and Huang, the scene between Baylan and Shin, between, Thrawn and Baylan. Actually, that was another one that we didn't really talk about as much. That was really cool. Between Thrawn and Sabine. I mean, there needs to be a little bit more expositional dialogue. I think that's, normally we say, oh, we want more action, we want more of this, we want more of that. It would be nice to see some more expositional dialogue, because I do agree, especially for more casual fans, it wouldn't hurt. Give us a little bit more context of what's going on. Not just, again, this is kind of feeling like a live action cartoon. That's the problem, if you had to sum it up. So I don't completely disagree with people like maybe David or some other people that are a little bit critical of this. I think we all agree that there's some issues, but, I think that it's just landing on different spots. Let's see. Let me get these last few chats in, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, no, that was it. All right. That was the last few chats. All right, guys, so I just realized we don't know what we're talking about Monday yet, do we?
Not yet.
No, we didn't. And we should be live. Lord willing.
Yes, we should.
We should actually be live on Monday at 8 o'clock. So, you guys are just going to have to sort of check us out and see what kind of trouble we get into. All right, David says, this would be one of those great topics I'd love to discuss in person. a good use of my show appearance. That's right. Because he's a Jedi Master, he gets to actually come on the show and be a third co-host. So if you guys support us at $25 a month at the I'm going to do this. I shouldn't, but I'm going to. See, you got like the 3 levels, right? Padawan at $5 a month, Jedi Knight at $10, Jedi Master at $25. So you see, guest appearance on our show is at the $25. And it's kind of funny because, the question becomes something like, well, what if like a bunch of people, start supporting you? You're going to have all these co-hosts. It's like, well, we'll do it as long as it's practical because, look, if you're actually willing to support us at that level, you should have something kind of special. And we've been admittedly kind of Jack and David here on the T-shirt thing, which I promise is still in the works. We'll get that out, but yes. And that would actually be kind of a cool discussion. Actually, I can only imagine when David comes on the show live, I can only imagine what that show is going to be like. All right. So with that, we will see you guys on Monday at 8. Just keep your eye on the channel and you'll see basically what we're going to talk about. Hopefully you guys all join us then. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Darryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.